Kyle Snarr is one of the co-founders behind Cantonment, a new accessories line where kerchiefs serve as their flagship product. We talk about his love of storytelling and how his petrolhead father shaped his film school application, where he ended up alongside the Napoleon Dynamite crew. Years later, after much success in the marketing sphere building award-winning websites for the very car brands that influenced Standard H, Kyle was plucked and became the head of marketing for Gear Patrol. Kyle and I are nothing if not birds of a feather, as we both are product guys through and through. Cars, gadgets, knives, watches. We love it all and obsess over the details. Being a product guy is what led Kyle to launch Cantonment with two friends, which started as a side project / hobby 4 years ago, only to launch at the beginning of COVID-19. It's times like these that allow creativity to shine, and what I love about Cantonment is their team-driven approach to the business from day one, and I think you'll agree. We close out the show with why the Land Rover Defender is so drooled over, and also what might make its way into Kyle's dream garage. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H Podcast. Yeah. Well, it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just listening to your latest episode on my run today, feeling quite intimidated.
Oh, no. Who was it? Oh, with Brian?
Yeah. Just that he's got such a storied, a cool history in the space. So
yeah.
And you are seeing me in my daughter's closet, by the way, just because it's the most serene, quiet place in the house. Because I have 4 kids.
What are their ages?
My oldest is 17, just kind of 17, and then I have so she's learning to drive and stuff like that. I have a son who's 14, a daughter who's 12, and a daughter who's 8.
Oh, so your hands are full.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm sorry, did you say they're all daughters?
No, I have my second oldest is a boy.
Okay. I was going to say there's got to be some sort of testosterone eventually at some point to balance it out.
Yeah, he's interesting. He's an interesting scenario surrounded by women most of the time. So I have to be like a dad and a brother to him,
Yeah, for sure.
But we're good buds. We're really good friends. So
that's awesome. Yeah, very cool. Mr. Kyle Snarr, thank you for joining the podcast. I really appreciate you doing the show. I am officially a paid subscriber of Zoom, so we're not capped to 40 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here. Big fan of the pod, man.
Thank you very much. So for the listeners, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah. My parents are from the Salt Lake Valley, and was raised in Salt Lake City till the age of 7, when my dad got a job transfer to New York. And I grew up in the Hudson River Valley, about an hour north of New York City. That's kind of halfway between West Point and New Paltz, New York. So just up on the west side of the Hudson, with a couple of, auto enthusiast parents in a kind of a cool place to go take a Sunday afternoon drive, and lived out here until I went out west for school.
Okay, sweet. So I'm familiar with Blue Hill, the restaurant in West Village, and they have the farm, right? That's up that way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a ton of interesting little places up there. I grew up right near a really famous modern art museum called Storm King. Massive modern art sculptures. I could ride there on my bike as a kid from my house. That's kind of where the vicinity was where I grew up.
Oh, cool. And what was your dad doing back then that he got transferred?
He was working in business finance for a medical manufacturing company, and then moved over to working in finance for the insurance company Prudential at their corporate headquarters. So he was a commuter. So he would wake up early in the morning, commute down to the corporate headquarters, which were located down in Newark, New Jersey at the time. And then now it was like an hour plus drive, and then would come on back. And so he had like kind of really cool cars when I was a little kid. And then when I became a little bit older and he was commuting, he went to more kind of sensible and fuel efficient cars. And then when I got a little bit older, he actually bought his own business that was a little closer to home. So he got some cooler cars back in the house.
Cool. What was your favorite of his in the bunch as a kid?
Yeah, so he lived a couple years in Germany and came back a bit of a Beamer file, right? So we had a slew of 2002s when I was a little kid,
Love
a
that.
TII, a Bavaria, a couple other 2002s,
Yeah.
and then kind of went into more kind of sensible cars for a little while there. But then, we also had some really random ones. Like we had a Saab and a Volvo, but we also had a couple of Renault Le Cars. You know these guys, these little Le Cars.
Yeah.
We had an orange one for a little bit, and it was just kind of a funny little interesting cars throughout most of my childhood. But then he got another 2002 when I was in high school, 76 cherry red, and then he swapped that right as I was about to go to out to college. He swapped it for an 88 M5 sedan. Yeah, which is an awesome car to kind of teach me and kind of educate me on my automotive tastes as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. What were the subjects you were kind of drawn to in school as a kid?
Yeah, when I was little, I thought I was going to be one of two things when I grew up. I was either going to design vehicles like cars and jets. I was just way into like I had like this like Crayola drafting table that I would just draw cars on all day long that my
Amazing.
parents got me, or I thought I was going to be a film director. I was either going to like design cars or I was going to be directing film. And so I thought I was going to be in math and like taking all these mathematical classes to kind of be an engineer. And then I realized real quick that I'm not that great at math, which is hysterical because my dad is a numbers guy and his dad's a mathematician, and I was just like that was not my thing.
Yeah.
But I was very lucky that in high school I had an amazing photography teacher, and I took his class. And I'm still good friends with him to this day, and really got into photography. And I had an amazing English teacher, and she got me into writing short stories. And so I just started putting stories on paper, putting stories on film, and really fell in love with storytelling. And it was great. My photography teacher got me a job at a local camera shop in town, which
Right.
is a place where you could, develop film or buy cameras. And I worked there my entire high school kind of time frame. Never had to work at like McDonald's or any fast food. I worked at a camera shop, and so I was selling cameras to people, developing film, and the a lot of the film students from New Paltz would come down and get their movie film developed at this little camera shop, and I just thought they were like the coolest people on the planet. And I was just like, I got off of like the car design boat and like full on into like I want to make movies and I want to be like these film students. So
Oh,
that's what I ended
wow.
up majoring in college. Was I got into the film school at Brigham Young University.
Oh, sure. BYU. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What what were kind of the cameras you were shooting with back then?
I mean, honestly, it's one of the cameras that we actually have featured on this new brand that we've just developed. But I bought from that camera shop a Pentax K1000, little manual, advance. Everything was pretty manual at the time. But yeah, I shot tons of film on that in black and white film that I developed myself in school. And yeah, I shot a ton of that. And then I was able to pick up like a Super 8 camera and some old movie cameras that are tons of fun. Those are fun to have as kind of showpieces from a
Yeah.
past life.
Well, music's been coming up a lot lately in my chats. So what was coming through the speakers of the 2002 and the 88 Beamer and things like that?
Back then, I was an REM kid. Like, was just everything. I just really loved their music, and was kind of like an oddball. Being in kind of upstate New York ish. We were about an hour from the city. So my buddies and I, we were the type of kids who would like save up our money and buy train tickets to go down to Grand Central and like run down to Soho and like dive into like bins of imports and
Yeah.
B-sides and find
Yeah,
all
yeah.
this like cool like music from wherever, a lot of alternative music at the time, I guess. Funny, the later in school, the gal I ended up getting married to, she introduced me to more of kind of the UK bands like Blur and James and stuff like that. And
Oh,
so when we
yeah.
were first together, we'd come back and visit my parents in New York, and we'd do the same thing, go down to Soho and go dive in the bins of imports and B-sides for sure.
Yeah, James, that's a band I haven't thought of in ages.
Great
Yeah.
band. Seen them live, danced with them. They came down in the audience, danced with us. Awesome.
Sweet. Yeah, that's a man, what a blast from the past. That's amazing. That's so good. So you went to BYU and you studied film?
Correct. Yeah, yeah. So it was interesting. I got into film school with a student film that I made. We had to shoot it on with no sound, this short little 1 minute video. And so my buddy at the time, he had a Delta 88 that we called the Love Machine, two bench seats, right? And the first time I ever borrowed it from him, I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a nice guy. I'm going to fill it up for him. I remember pulling it into the gas station and like took me like solid 10 minutes to find that the gas cap was under the license plate. So it's like I pull in the one side and like look, I'm like, oh, it must be on the other side. Pull out, pull back in the other way, and look, walk around. I'm like, dang, where's this thing? And finally found that it was under the license plate in the back, which became the premise of my film that I shot to get accepted into film school.
Oh, amazing.
Huge car, and then like cannot run out of gas, pull up to the gas station, and can't figure out what to do. The final frame of the little video was zooming in on the license plate and then fade to black. Just that's where it's hidden. That got me in, and I was really kind of trying to focus on being a screenwriting kind of emphasis there.
Sure.
And it was about halfway through film school when I kind of realized I was not a huge fan of writing full-length feature stuff, and I really kind of loved shorter narratives. And at what was happening at the time, like industry-wise, is two big things happened, both very kind of automotive related. The agency Arnold out of Boston got the VW account, and they started shooting these amazingly cinematic TV spots that
Oh,
were starting to run before movies. And I just remember sitting in a dark theater and them showing this amazing commercial for, at the time, was a Volkswagen Cabrio, I think. And it was this beautiful spot that's known as Pink Moon because they play a song by Nick Drake called Pink Moon. Super cinematic and just so engrossing and awesome. And I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is where my skills of like my love of cars and my love of kind of more shorter storytelling narratives, this is what I should be doing. I should be in advertising.
yeah.
And so the other thing that happened right around then is the agency Fallon out of Minneapolis was working with BMW and released a series. I don't know if you remember this, a series of shorts,
Yeah.
Higher series. That was kind of like that big first example of like branded content out there, high quality, super high quality branded content. And that just like literally blew my mind and just like really twisted everything about how I felt I could actually put my passions and my skills into one place. And so what I did is I didn't want to change my major. I loved being a film major, but I started minoring in communications and wanted to get into as many advertising classes as I could. So I went and kind of just camped out in front of the professors for all the advertising classes that normally you'd have to like actually like test to get in or like have a portfolio and like kind of like win a place inside these classes. But I just like camped out in front of these professors' rooms and just did everything I could to befriend them, make them laugh, make them smile, brighten their day, and then just kind of weaseled my way into the next semester's worth of classes by just kind of becoming, I don't know, not annoying, but always omnipresent in these people's like hallways.
Sure.
And I got to minor in advertising essentially. And yeah, it was a great place to go to school. I went to school with the same crew of guys and gals who worked on Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, wow.
The director, he shot my senior piece, which was a spot for the Yamaha Vino, which was my senior piece. And he shot that for me. I went to school with John Heater, who plays Napoleon. He was in my Photoshop class, and fun time to be going to film school for sure.
Sure. Yeah. So when you got out of school, what was your first job?
Yeah, it was interesting. So it was. I started interviewing in New York. I started interviewing in San Francisco, and my senior year, I befriended a couple of graphic designers, and we started working on some pieces together where, they were learning motion graphics and I was a film student. And I mean, it was kind of interesting. The way I met these guys is we were all went to a mutual friend's going away party at a restaurant, and we're sitting there, and there's a guy sitting across the table, and I see him playing around with his keys, his car keys, and it kind of flops over, and the fob on the set of car keys was an M3.
Oh, sweet.
And I was just like, dude, nice car.
And so what year is this?
This was around 2001. So I graduated in 2002. Right after that party, we went out to the parking lot, and he's got a 4-door E36, looks amazing, and we just became instant pals, And so we started working on projects with each other our senior year, where he would help lay out stuff for my advertising portfolio, and I'd help shoot stuff for his motion graphics classes. About a year after graduation, as I'm interviewing in New York and interviewing in San Francisco, he had a huge client and had a partner who had another client, and all of a sudden they needed help. They needed someone to come in and write copy, and they needed someone to concept and direct motion graphics pieces. And so I just started working with them. And then about a year after that, we started doing a ton of flash animation at the time. And we were doing it in a way that no one else out there was doing. We were creating these sequences of stills and putting them into flash that created essentially a motion effect. And it was starting to get us onto the radar of multiple advertising agencies in big cities.
Oh,
Just
wow.
like, at the time, there was 4 of us in 800 square foot space in Salt Lake City, Utah. Pretty much, way off the radar, but we started doing these really cool websites that were winning awards and starting to like pick up steam, and the phone started ringing. And this little agency is called Struck. It's still in Salt Lake. And I remember the day the phone started ringing, and everyone, the 4 of us, would just kind of fumble over who would try and answer the phone. And it was like so unprofessional. I was mortified by how unprofessional it seemed. And so one day I was just like, guys, when the phone rings, I will answer it. If it's for you, I will transfer it. And that one day's decision literally changed the course of my career, much like, spotting this dude's M3 key
Right.
fob.
Right.
That day, I became this little agency's first receptionist, for one thing, but
Right.
also became the first account guy, the first new biz guy, the first voice that people would hear when they called. And I would really try hard to convert these people into a client of ours. What I learned really quick is I was a better writer of proposals than I was of advertising. I switched my brain into going like, maybe I just need to be focused on generating business for this agency. And so I switched to the director of new business role. And over the course of the next 10 years, we grew that space, that agency, from an 800 square foot space with 4 guys to 4 offices and 80 people.
Wow.
And it was a wild ride because we rode that whole flash microsite craze, and I got to work for amazing clients. We got to do great work for a lot of automotive brands, which I was just way into, and win business for BMW and Mini and Volkswagen and GM and Porsche, and just do these really amazing sites that were out there winning awards and putting us on the map, and the phone just kept on ringing. And so it was just this crazy wild ride through flash into social media, into mobile design, and just watching that whole entire category of digital agency not be a thing when we started and become the thing when I eventually left that agency.
Yeah, sure. So how did you wind up in New York then?
Yeah, it's a great question. I had been at Struck for 10 years, and I remember the week that I turned 10, which is a long time for advertising world. I had never ever looked for another job, but that week I had turned 10, I got 3 different agencies reached out to me about asking if I was looking to go anywhere else, and I hadn't even thought about it. And I said no to all 3, but that planted a weird little seed, of just like, maybe I need to challenge myself. Maybe I need to go somewhere else. Maybe I need to see what else I'm good at. Um, that was just the planting of the seed. I didn't do anything about it. 6 months later, I was heading off to our little Christmas break, and I saw my phone had a message and it was flashing, and so I picked it up and listened to it, and it was a recruiter from an agency, actually an agency that we had formerly worked with, an Omnicom agency called Tribal Worldwide out of New York City, and saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a director of new business for this agency." And I was just like, "Oh boy!" And I hung up the phone and went on Christmas break and didn't think about it. Came back and debated whether I should call them back, but I thought I should always just hear what they have to say. And sure enough, they were looking at me to come and run new business for Tribal Worldwide for North America. And I, they gave me an offer. I said no. They gave me another offer. I said no. And they gave me a third offer. And I had to say yes.
The price kept going up?
It was a great offer. So at that point, my wife and I, we had 4 kids.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Our family of 4 from Salt Lake City to New York. And now we moved to a place just outside the city, and I've lived here for the last almost 6 years.
Cool. So then you were at, I'm sorry, you said it was called Tribal?
Correct.
What took you away from Tribal?
Yeah, it was interesting. I landed in New York, and about a week after being here, I got an email from Pinterest. And so Pinterest was an app that I love, and I curate stuff on it pretty much daily. And they were really interested in one of my boards, which was my camping inspiration board. And they asked if they could spotlight me on their corporate blog. Wow. And I was like, sure. So they did a little questionnaire with me, and I kind of talked about my love of the outdoors. And the day that went live, it was funny because I mentioned one of the questions they asked is, where do you find your most pins? And I actually at the time found almost all my pins on an app called Flipboard, which I also loved.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Yeah. And I just said, I find almost all my pins on Flipboard. And it's funny because Pinterest and Flipboard at the time were pretty competitive with one another. And so I never thought they'd even publish it, but sure enough, they published that line verbatim on the Pinterest corporate blog. And the day that went live, someone at Flipboard got like a Google alert or something. And it's like, well, who is mentioning Flipboard positively on the Pinterest corporate blog? And so they called me in my office in New York and just said, "Who are you?" And I was like, "This is who I am. Yes, I love Pinterest. I also use Flipboard every day and like religious about it." And about a year later, they offered me a job, Flipboard, to come on board and be what they call the head of brand communication, which is really to start arming their sales team with better tools in market and telling the Flipboard story in a better way to advertisers. And that was amazing. So it was kind of funny. This funny little moment I had with Pinterest ended up getting me hired at one of their competitors. And so I worked at Flipboard for 2 years. In the process, I got to know a ton of amazing publishers out there. I met and got to write an article for the guys at Gear Patrol through that job at Flipboard. I got to work really closely with the folks at Vox Media. And, it was a very kind of well-connected place to be in the media scene in New York. After that, I got hired at Vox Media and got to do the same thing kind of that I was doing at Flipboard, but for just a much larger sales team. Like they have a national sales team, and I was really loved working with that whole squad of folks where I'm going in and creating their go-to-market message, kind of telling like why advertisers should come and advertise with Vox Media and each of their amazing publications. So I got to work with the folks at Vox.com, at The Verge, at Eater, at SB Nation, all these amazing titles that they had, and then work and go hand in hand with all the sales team members and help them tell better stories in their pitches and get to know the story and tell it very authentically to their audience. And so that was a ton of fun. And then one day, I'm at work and I get a text message from my friends at Gear Patrol, and they just said, "Go look at the website on the careers page," and that was it. That's all the text said. And sure enough, there was a position there that was crafted just for a guy like me. So I
Right.
applied, and
What was that title?
posted was director of integrated marketing, and ended up becoming a head of marketing position.
So you already had buddies there, so they were, hip to tell you about it.
Yeah, I got a text one day for sure. And so yeah, I spent the last 2 years at Gear Patrol, um, and just really grew to love the idea of product journalism. I'm a product guy. As
Yeah.
you know, I love automotive. I love automobiles. I love the outdoors. I love watches. And so it's just a really great place to kind of learn about each of those topics and how to cover them from a journalistic point of view, but also how to do amazing branded content around of those things. And where my role really was is how to activate enthusiasts for those topics.
So what were some of the actions you were taking to do just that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, and this is obviously pre-COVID, but one of the big things that we launched while I was there that became really cool and really fun to work on was our events. Like people who are enthusiastic about products, they love to get together with other enthusiasts, obviously. So we launched a really great series of reader events that were kind of like either evening activations or daytime like active lifestyle sort of events. So whether that was getting together and having a watch meetup at the Phillips auction house, which was really
Right.
cool,
Yeah.
or was meeting at a park in Brooklyn and going on a guided run and then doing a guided stretch afterward. So those were really cool. We kind of called those activations our in the field activations. And then probably my favorite and like kind of the biggest thing I helped to do while at Gear Patrol was launch their first 2-day event, which was a conference that we called Stocked, a product culture conference. So
Cool.
that one we partnered with the New York Car Club, the Manhattan Car Club. Excuse me, it's the Classic Car Club of Manhattan. Let me just get that
I,
right. We put on a 2-day event there where like kind of day one was more for, I would say, industry folks, product marketers, product designers, reporters, and enthusiasts to get together, talk to, or hear from, I should say, our journalists at the time, as well as the different influencers and like kind of more kind of decisions makers at a series of brands, and just kind of really dive into how those decisions are made, how things are marketed, why like products are called what they're called, and kind of learning about that backstory and the inception of some of those great products out there. And then day two, it was really cool. We kind of changed the floor plan and brought in these kind of not really booths, but kind of stations where we curated a handful of like about 20 different amazing brands to come in and just invite anyone who wanted to come in off the street to come in and learn about these different products and touch and feel and test, as well as purchase products. And it was just a massively fun endeavor that taught me a ton about how to activate an enthusiast audience.
That's really cool. So because it was 2 days though, if people were coming in, was that on their own dime or were you guys paying for hotels for these people or like how was that working?
Most people were paying to come in.
I was gonna say because I could see it being feasible either way.
Yeah, no, people flew from California and Florida and
Yeah.
drove from all over the place to come and meet for this event. It was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you were at Gear Patrol for 2 years, and just recently you launched Cantonment.
Correct.
So let's talk about this and how that all began.
Yeah, so it was interesting. It actually did begin a bit from when I was a little kid growing up in the Hudson Valley. I had a couple buddies who we would do that kind of bin diving in Soho with. When we weren't doing that, we were oftentimes backpacking on the Appalachian Trail and spending our summers on the
Sweet.
nearby AT.
Yeah.
I've been friends with these guys since a little kid. And when I was at Flipboard, I was, hoofing it from Grand Central down to their offices in near Madison Square Park every day. And one day, my buddy who I grew up with, he called me, and he's a product guy. His name's Matt Hine, and he is a leather worker and a woodworker, and also spends his days creating products for other companies at the agency he works for. And he called me up and he just said, "Hey, I really want to do a product of my own, and I would like to do that with you. Do you have any ideas?" And literally, I'm on the phone. It's like the middle of summer. I'm hoofing it to work, and I'm just sweating profusely. And at the time, I was like starting to carry a bandana with me to kind of like either A, kind of mop my brow a little bit, or B, I would often tie it around my neck to protect my collar from getting all sweaty if I had to wear a collared shirt that day. And I was like, and he said to me, "I really want to do my own product. I need it to be a soft good, but I don't want it to have to carry sizes. Like I don't want an extra small to an XL of inventory." And I was just like, "Dude, do you know what I really am looking for? I am looking for like the perfect size bandana, because a bandana is awesome to tie around your neck. It doesn't fit miraculously well in a pocket. It's kind of big, it's kind of bunchy. And a handkerchief is super handy. It fits in your pocket and you can kind of mop your brow, but you can't do much else. You can't tie it around your neck. You can't use it for many other purposes. I need that perfectly sized tool cloth that is not as big as a bandana, which is typically 20 inches by 20 inches or bigger, but not as small as a handkerchief, which is typically around 13 by 13 is like a handkerchief or pocket square. So I need something in between. And he's like, "Dude, let's just start figuring out." So that was like 4 years ago that we started iterating on different fabric sizes. And so he would just send me samples of different fabrics. So we tried all these different types of materials, different stitching on the edges, and different sizes. But we had figured out that the ideal size, we figured out what that was. And for us, we think it's 18.5 by 18.5 is really the perfect sized cloth. And it slides like right in your back pocket without bunching up or getting kind of too bulky. And we found out that definitely the material was 100% cotton, absorbent, soft, but really durable. Right. My buddy Matt had reached out to another friend that we grew up with, who his name is Kenny Ellsworth, and he's an amazing architect down in Atlanta. And he is like really interested in the product too. And so he had, just for fun, like designed some amazing sketches of some products and sent them our way. And so, right around the beginning of quarantine here in New York, it was a scary time, and we all of us found ourselves with a lot of time on our hands. I remember just calling Matt and saying, "Dude, like we have this product, we know the size, we know the material, we have some cool designs. How long would it take for us to actually get this going?" He's like, we could probably have product in 6 weeks. I'm like, "Dude, let's just do it. Let's just do it." And so we pulled the trigger. We took these things off the shelf that had been backburnered for a long time. We quickly took and resurrected this brand that I had concepted a couple of years ago, and applied it to these products. And we launched about a month and a week ago, and it's going great. So I'm probably, I don't know, I'm pretty new to the entrepreneurial space, which is funny for a podcast which is focused on that. But it's awesome. And the brand is called Cantonment. So that is a word that I fell upon because, we all grew up in this town in upstate New York. It was called New Windsor. And New Windsor is actually, the town itself was a massive part of Revolutionary War history. So it wasn't far from Washington's headquarters. The General Knox, his headquarters was a few streets from my house. Wow. And a few streets from there was actually the last campsite of the Revolutionary Army. And it was a place we used to go to when we were kids and see like reenactments of Revolutionary War battles. And they had like a working blacksmith shed on site. And that plot of land is called the New Windsor Cantonment. And a cantonment is a military style campsite. So when I was thinking about the name of this company and just trying to find something that would have meaning to us, that little location was a place that we went to together as kids, and on field trips or whatever. And it it's a word that, you don't hear too often, I think, in everyday language. So it was pretty free of, other people using it at the time. And I just thought, that we love camping. We grew up in this area. Let's just go with Cantonment, and we all just kind of said, yeah, that's the name of the company. And this product that we had developed, it's not a bandana. It's not. It's just smaller. It's a different product than a bandana, and it's not a handkerchief. But as I started researching the roots of those words and things like that, we just kind of settled on kerchief, and that's what we call it, and that's what it is. It is a kerchief, but we call it a kerchief, capital K, also. And not only did we grow up together, we were also in like the same scout troop, and so it was really fun to kind of, with my buddy Matt being a leather worker, he started fiddling around with leather and trying to find like a little way to kind of do a little neckerchief slide, like we had when we were in scouts, and he developed one out of leather that we really liked. And as I started researching that a little bit, I discovered that kerchief slides in England, where they kind of were developed, were called woggles. And so we just kind of adopted that name for the name of this little strap that comes with your kerchief. And we really wanted to do it in leather, and we started looking at the cost, and we realized real quick for a startup, leather would just be a little cost prohibitive. But we were talking about like, what would we do? And I looked down at my watch, and sure enough, I was wearing a gray Nato at the time. I was just like, dude, what if we just made it out of this material, the nylon? And Matt went and bought some bunch of Nato straps immediately and started cutting them up, and we started just using that as the material. And sure enough, it worked great. And when we ran the costs, it was awesome in terms of just making sure that it was affordable for a startup. It was just very fortuitous, and all of these passions of ours started coming together. So the other thing that was really interesting is that, as I was using these products and just testing it over time, I really started realizing that I needed to bring two with me to work. Like I really wanted one to tie around my neck, and maybe one to occasionally sneeze into or something like that. I didn't want those to be the same one. Yeah. And so we thought, man, what if we just always sold them in pairs? What if we always sold you two kerchiefs? And we thought that would be a great way to kind of up the value of the product also, but also have a fun kind of dual canvas to showcase some different, product enthusiast like themes.
Sure.
And so we launched with 3 themes last month. We launched with an automotive theme, a watch theme, and a camera theme. 2 kerchiefs in each kit or set, as we call them, and 1 woggle, which was really cool because when we folded up and kind of rolled up 2 kerchiefs together, the woggle strap that we created almost by accident perfectly fit around 2 to hold them together. And that was that little happy accident. We had to do a little fine tuning for sure, but like a happy accident that kind of inspired the packaging, which is super minimalist and just a cardboard sleeve that's held together by the actual strap.
Are you a watch collector but having trouble finding something cool and unique? I mean, the last thing you really want is what everyone else has, right? Well, this is where my friend and former Standard H podcast guest Tim Jackson comes in. He and his wife Jana own Passion Fine Jewelry in Solana Beach, California, where you'll find an incredible assortment of independent watches waiting for you in their shop and online. And if you're getting engaged, have an anniversary coming up, or simply have another reason to buy jewelry, they have you covered. Passion Fine Jewelry also employs a goldsmith on staff for any custom desires, so you're able to go that route if you so choose. Visit Passion Fine Jewelry when you find yourself in Southern California, but they're also open 24 hours a day at passionfinejewelry.com. You can also find a wealth of information through Tim's blog, independentintime.com, where he covers anything independent watchmaking related, among a plethora of other information, so check that out as well. I've really enjoyed creating these podcasts on behalf of Standard H and sharing each of these personal stories with all of you. We each have goals, and it's the entrepreneurial spirit that inspired me to start the company. You can further support the brand and the podcast by visiting standard-h.com to pick up your choice of merchandise, and as always, thank you for listening. Lastly, if you have a moment, please rate and review the show. It makes a tremendous difference in keeping these things going. Now back to my conversation with Kyle. Yeah, I kind of want to get into this a little more granularly, if that's all right. But so, what is the structure of the business? There's you, there's Kenny, right, and then there's Matt, and so there's the three of you. What are the roles exactly?
Sure. Yeah. So we're all title wise, just for the time being, we're all co-founders. Um, Matt is really focused on product and operations. So his job is he's a product developer by trade. So he understands the manufacturing processes. He understands speaking to the factories. He understands kind of like what we need to carry in terms of inventory and how to structure logistics and how to structure also fulfillment. So he's really focused on that. Kenny, as you know, a trained architect and you know someone who went to design school, he's really focused on the brand as well as the graphics on both the product as well as the packaging. And his job is really to kind of come up with amazing art and ideas that feel authentic to us. And then I'm on the marketing side. And so my job has been, you know, finding the right software for our launch website, finding the right partners to go to market with, finding, telling our story in social media, telling our story to potential collaborators and things like that. So that's how we've kind of divvied up the roles in a small, you know, part-time startup scenario.
Right. So, is Kenny still working as an architect in Atlanta? Are you guys still separated?
Yeah, so Matt is in Salt Lake City, Kenny is in Atlanta, and I'm here in New York. And so this entire company has been virtual from day one.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, how many iterations did you do exactly before you landed on the final? The 18 and a half.
Totally. We probably went through 4 sets of sizes and materials,
Mm-hmm.
maybe five. But and that coupled with just buying all kinds of samples that are out there on the market as well, and kind of seeing what people had out there, and like understanding what we liked, what felt nice, what felt right, what was the right size, what was just too dang big. And yeah, so between 4 or 5 iterations and numerous, you know, samples that we collected over the years, it took a while to kind of figure out what that size would be. But once we found this, the fabric was the biggest win there. We were really lucky to find a cotton that is both like super soft, very supple in the way it feels, extremely durable, washes well, dries well, and very absorbent. And then also figuring out the stitching. So a lot of bandanas, they have kind of a rolled edge with just like a single stitch across it, which is fine. I have awesome bandanas with that type of finishing on it. But a
Yep.
lot of handkerchiefs actually have like a serging on the side. We went and took that one step further, and we did, again, kind of like reaching back to our scouting roots a little bit. We did more of like what's called a marrowed edge, which
Yep.
is the kind of edging that you'll see on the side of a patch.
Yep. That's what I have on the sides of my patches. I have a marrowed edge on the standard H patch.
Yeah, so we used that on the edge of this, and it gives it that really clean finish and that cool kind of bright pop of an alternating color.
Yep. Yeah, and some pocket squares have a marrowed edge as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of handkerchiefs and pocket squares have either a surged or marrowed edge.
So, what other fabrics did you guys explore prior to landing on 100% cotton?
Yeah, so we had definitely the initial idea was that we wanted to do something that was had a really interesting story to it. So we were looking at some bamboo fabrics that were naturally antimicrobial and also could be used with lenses and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And we do like that. And fabrics is a cool way that we can see ourselves iterating on our product over time for sure. But again, when we were like considering what it would cost to get out the gate with a product that we felt super confident in the quality and in the functionality, we
Yeah.
just could not beat 100% cotton because it
Right.
it just came with um, so much functionality at an affordable cost for us.
How did you guys go about choosing the colors? Because they're pretty vibrant, right? And really distinct. So, can you talk about the color choices?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so this also grew a little bit out of the fact that we felt pretty passionately about having two in each set. What two allows you to do is it allows you to have a color that is one that might be a little bit more bold and a little bit more loud, and then one that's maybe a little bit more subdued or a little bit
Yeah.
more user friendly. We kind of like that idea of having one in each set that was more fun and vibrant, and one that was a little more chill.
Sure.
And so the colors, our color story was always something we wanted to focus on really, really strongly from day one. I took a lot of inspiration from one of my favorite brands, which is Topo Designs. At the same time, and this is something I learned a long time ago, back in like my agency days when we were helping companies choose corporate colors for a rebrand or something like that. We learned really quick back then that color is like literally the most subjective thing when it comes to
Yeah.
making a choice.
Hmm.
We learned way back when I was, in a small agency, when we were presenting logos, never present them in color, always present them in black and white, because people
Right.
will inevitably say, I like the green one, right? And not look at the actual design. So
Right.
color is super subjective. And I think it's interesting as we are now in the process of designing more kerchiefs and making decisions about what themes to go after and what colors work with that theme. Color that those choices and are really, really important to us and really critical. And for us, we want to be bold, we want to be brave, and have some cool colors. At the same time, earlier this week, I ran a little informal poll, on Instagram, asking folks to say, if we were to produce more, like what colors would you get? And we had a, like a small handful of respondents, and all of them said black and white. So it's interesting, and we're taking that data right now and we're internalizing it and trying to figure out, okay, so what does that mean, and how can we make that part of our color story without losing something that we feel passionate about, which is like having making a statement, having a bold piece of accessory is part of your kit.
Right.
So we're looking at what we can do with that alternating color along that mirrored edge and stuff like that. So there's, it's just interesting when you do take a poll, people are like, yeah, give me a black and white one. It's just kind of a funny um, realization that you have to kind of come to grips with.
So when did you guys realize, like, what was the moment that you just understood your product to be finished design wise? Like what defined it as being done?
When we were um, experimenting and working on the woggle strap, it winds on itself and has a little kind of stud that you can fit through a little buttonhole.
Hmm.
And we're sitting there, and my partner Matt, he's, like I said, he's a woodworker. He has a shop, and he is oftentimes just covered in sawdust. And he was like, what if we just put a little buttonhole on the corner of this kerchief, and that way you could take the neckerchief slide and fold it around on itself and use it to hang a kerchief from your belt.
Right.
And we're like, oh my gosh, like that is such a cool use case,
Yeah.
And so we had some samples made with the buttonhole in one corner, and we were like, wow, this is super cool. This is like a whole nut. This is a new product. This isn't a bandana. This is a different product.
Right.
And as we started using it, we all kind of came to the same conclusion ourselves, that one corner wasn't enough. We should put a buttonhole in the other three too. And all
Right.
of a sudden, you infinitely like open up the use case for this product, where you can
Sure.
hang it from multiple touch points. You can actually take all four and pin them up together and put the little stud on the woggle through all four buttonholes and get a little impromptu tote out of it. And that's great for, like, for me, if I take my kids to the beach, and they're always collecting shells. I now have a little pouch I can keep them in, because instead of just
Right.
trying to like manhandle them.
And you don't get sand in your pockets.
Exactly. And even when James Stacy was testing it, he was like, man, this is great for foraging. When I'm out on a walk and I'm like picking berries or something like that, I can toss them in here. And so all of a sudden, when we saw that we had a product that was not a bandana, it was not a handkerchief, it was something that was completely new, and it was iterated upon and riffed on in a way that pushed it into new possibilities of functionality, we were like, okay, we have something different. It's been awesome for retailers like the team at Worn and Wound, who saw the product and were just like, yeah, let's put it in the store. And the team at Huckberry who saw the product and were like, yes, that's totally different. Let's put it in the store. They recognized quickly that we were trying to tell a new story with something that probably your dad or your grandpa and my dad and my grandpa always carried around with them. We have bringing that back into a man's or a woman's or anyone's everyday carry.
So where are they manufactured, and how'd you guys go about finding manufacturing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're really lucky. So Matt, who I told you works for a product design agency, they about 10 years ago set up a team in China that created a kind of a very vetted group of factories, everything from printing to manufacturing to creating apparel or soft goods. And so he works with them every single day to create in his day job products for his clients. But we were able to tap into that vetted, like, long-standing relationship and use it for Cantonment as well. So we know the factories that we are creating this in are factories that we know to be smart and clean and following all the right policies and procedures of being like a vetted solid factory with a 10 plus year relationship with those places, which is really powerful and really great and gives us a lot of confidence. It also, that lasting relationship just benefits us so that we can, leverage a little bit of the buying power he's earned over the years there. So.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's incredible. That's super convenient.
They come from China, wound up and packaged and ready to go for us.
So soup to nuts, just done.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing about warehousing / shipping, fulfillment, all that?
Well, right now it's being handled by hand, and I'm pretty sure Matt has 4 daughters that have packaged a few things for us over the last few weeks.
So interns, he's got interns.
Yes, he does, and so that's what's happening right now. When we start doing the volume that requires more fulfillment and things like that, we do have partners that we've done stuff in the past with that we'll turn to for that type of storage and fulfillment.
Yeah, like third-party logistics or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to decide to launch during a pandemic?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting, right? Like this was a product that we developed and thought about 4 years ago. And it just so happens that, when we found ourselves with ample time on our hands to launch this, that it coincided, in not in a great way. And it's sad that there's this massive pandemic going on, but it's also a time where people are looking for face coverings. And, by no stretch of the imagination is our product a medical grade face covering. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
But, when I am out running in the morning or on a trail on my bike and I can't, kind of self-distance myself if I'm on a tight trail and I'm passing someone really closely, this is a great product to have tied around my neck and quickly, as I see someone approaching, it's got enough give in it and enough stretch in it just to be able to pull it up quickly over my nose and be that respectful covering as I fly by someone on a trail. I don't leave the home without it these days. Now it's just permanently tied around my neck, and something that also is fun and it looks cool and speaks to my my passion for products. And so I think what's happening is a lot of people are recognizing that they need all kinds of face coverings right now. They do need medical grade masks. They do need comfortable masks. They also want bandanas and they also want other soft face coverings. And so I think, again, we're not trying to say this is an alternative to, a medical grade mask, but people are using them to be respectful face coverings. And I think that's awesome. And it's exciting. And I think people who are watch enthusiasts and are auto enthusiasts can wear something that has a fun pop of color, but also speaks to their passion. And it becomes a bit of a signifier to those in the know.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of fun. It's just a way to represent the things you're passionate about. And, so on our chrono set, which is our watch designed set. We've got kind of a classic kind of Seiko style illustration of a diver watch on one, and kind of a classic chronograph on the other. On the auto set, we've got the headlight cluster from a Series 3 Land Rover on
Sweet.
one, and
Yep.
we've got a Fuchs rim on the other.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, and then on the on the Opti set, which is our camera theme set, we've got these cut-ins of the lens on a Pentax K1000 as well as the film advancer. And so these are really cropped in designs that are showing just a piece of a bigger product. And what's cool about that story, I think, is that people who are in the know can instantly recognize what that's an homage to.
So how much are these bad boys?
Well, and we tried really hard to price them in a way that we felt supported the value. For $40, you get 2 of these kerchiefs plus the woggle strap, and I think that based on the competition, it's a really good value. And I think that when you feel them and when you start using them a little bit, they feel high quality. We're really pleased with the quality of the product, and they feel like nice, and they feel good against your skin, and those are all big factors when it comes to choosing something that you're going to have with you all day long. So we think that they're priced pretty well for what we're putting together.
Were there any restrictions or were like minimums ever an issue for you guys?
We were, again, really lucky to benefit a bit from just a long history of producing products through our partner, through my business partner at this particular factory. So
Right.
we had a nice chunk of our first run, and we're chewing through it right now, and we're working on our next purchase. We'll be re-upping a couple of the current SKUs and introducing a couple more. And if you're game, I'm happy to announce to your audience what one of our next ones will be.
Yeah. No, let's do it. Talk about it.
Cool. So we are going to be doing another automotive set. We're going to be calling it Auto Mark II. It's going to be featuring 2 parts of a car that I love, and I'm sure you love as well. But we're really going to be focusing in on some recognizable pieces of classic GTIs.
Oh, sweet.
So we'll have the headlight
I was going to say, I have a feeling it's going to be headlight related.
headlight cluster of a Mark II, so
Sweet.
that's a very iconic
Amazing.
headlight cluster there. And then the steering wheel of a Mark I,
Oh,
as you know, is a very, very, very iconic 80s, super 80s, amazingly designed steering wheel.
have you decided on colors yet?
No, we are working on that right now. We have some ideas we're toying with. This feedback from our audience might be something that influences that as well. But, so we'll be choosing, for each set, we have to choose a color of fabric for each kerchief, plus a alternating color for the marrowed edge.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it'd be great, like black background, light gray with graphic, and then a red marrowed edge.
Oof.
I think it'd be perfect. That would just be my vote.
Duly noted.
So when do you think those will be coming out, if you had to guess?
Fall. They'll be out in the fall.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You're a marketing guy, so how are you marketing the product?
Sure. We are using Instagram primarily right now, and working with the right kinds of retailers. I'm also, I guess I can say also, that we're talking to multiple brands right now about doing collaborations, which is something I really learned about and got to do a lot at Gear Patrol, and launched a couple fun and worked on a few cool collaborations with the Gear Patrol store and different brands. And so that's something I understand the value of that, and the shared kind of amplification that comes from a cool collab.
Yeah. So you guys, what I understand to be pretty much your mission statement being dedicated to helping you strike better balance by creating high quality accessories that are stylish yet useful. Can we extrapolate that a bit? And like, what does that mean exactly?
So, for us, again, it goes a little bit to a few things. Kenny, our designer, he at art school, he learned a lot about just that massive, responsibility of form and function
Yeah.
as part of making a beautiful design. The logo that we use for Cantonment, it looks, I guess, like kind of like a cross, but really what it is a plus sign. In fact, the way I designed the logo was I typed out a plus sign and then put it in Illustrator and outlined it and bulked up the stroke on it to make it look a little bit more substantial, but it's a plus sign. And that idea of form plus function, or style plus substance,
Right.
is just a big deal to us. And that led to our tagline, which is stylized substance. When you add those things together, it becomes more than just a good looking product or a good, highly functional tool cloth. It becomes really the combination of that is something else. And I think we're really proud of that feeling that people have been kind of saying that they have when using our product, that it is stylish, but like there's that function that is really there to back up that style.
Yeah.
And I think we talk about it as the power of plus, and that is something that just we talk about it all the time in terms of us needing to plus up what we're doing, but also that not one of us in our company could have done this alone. It's just
Right.
not possible. I don't have the skill sets of someone who's been manufacturing goods in China for 10 years, and I don't have
Right.
the design skills of someone who has who can do an architectural rendering of a cool watch. And they don't have the contacts that I've developed over my years of marketing, right?
Yeah.
And so I learned this lesson back in school, which is when you have to collaborate, don't collaborate with people who duplicate what you do. Collaborate with people who complement what you do.
Yeah.
I think it's
Absolutely.
hard because we gravitate to people who are like us, right? And so
Right.
it's really hard to find someone who is like you but is different than you also.
Yeah. Well, given that your brand is accessory focused, what do you see as being future growth as far as the assortment's concerned? Like, what do you guys already have another product in mind, or is it just iterating on what you're doing?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer it with a little bit of like a tease and a little bit of like not answering it because I don't want to give stuff away, but iteration is a big deal to us. And we are absolutely going to be not just improving on our product, but launching new versions of it with added functionality. We also, the Woggle was initially concepted as a leather piece, and we certainly are excited to get to a point where that can be part of the future of the brand as well.
Sure. That's awesome. Um, just to sidestep more business talk, or I guess to sidestep business talk entirely, and just talk about life in general. What was the last public gathering you attended prior to COVID?
Oh, public gathering. I don't know. About a week before lockdown, my wife and I went on a double date, and we were talking about in a crowded restaurant, and we were talking about like, is this gonna be for reals? Is this happening?
Yeah.
And that we were very grateful that we went on that date.
Well, you and I obviously have a ton in common categorically, be it watches, cars, the love of the outdoors and such. What would you say is your ideal day off?
Oh boy. Well, I tell you, one thing that I've been working on is planning a backpacking trip with my son on the Appalachian Trail, on the very trail that me and my business partners grew up going to as kids. We're definitely we were going to do that in the spring, and that kind of got a wrench thrown in it. So we're going to
Right.
try and do it more like in the fall when it's not as hot and sweaty as it is in New York right now.
Yeah.
But he and I are gonna try and do a little bit of fishing and doing some lake hopping on the Appalachian Trail,
Sweet.
just camping out along the way. So that would be pretty ideal in terms of a day off or a weekend off or something like that. Yeah.
Has COVID been the impetus behind anything that you have grown to love selfishly, like be it, independent?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have gone on a lot more bike riding. That has become, we all had bicycles, but it was just like, okay, let's get these all tuned up. Let's get these all tightened and tires or tubes replaced. And so we've started cycling as a family a lot. And, that ranges from my son, who could like power past all of us, to my youngest, who, she's we have to kind of hang out with her and help her along the way. But cycling has become something that we've started doing pretty much on an every other day basis nowadays. And that's been a ton of fun. I listened to your podcast with the creator of Linus. That was like it's very interesting that the bike shop in our town has a line out the door every single day. And I think there is something exciting happening that's very real, and I hope does not change after this crisis is lessened, but that people do consider something other than a car to do that 2-mile radius sort of thing. And that's what we've been doing. And it's so funny because as a car guy, I purposely have to get out and like drive my car every once in a while, just because I want that feeling, or I need that, I need to make sure that it's running well and stuff like that. So that's like more of like a choice. It's not a necessity. And I don't even touch it if I don't have to or don't want to. So that's a really unique change that I think, and I hope, becomes just kind of part of our society moving forward.
Yeah, totally. So what's you mentioned the car. What's in the garage?
All right. So here's what happens when you get 4 kids. All right.
It's something large.
Yeah. So I was a car guy. I've been a car guy my whole life. The first car that I bought in college was a 75 Cherry Red 2002. And when our design firm back in the day took off, I was able to find a 1999 M Coupe, which super impractical and amazing to drive, super fun. And, and every single stoplight, the guy next to you is revving his engine at you every time. Like, it's a little annoying, honestly. And then I started driving, Mini Coopers. I actually love, probably the most fun cars I think I've owned. But once you get into multiple kids, one of those cars quickly becomes a minivan, and I'm a huge believer in the minivan. Love the minivan. We rock the minivan hard. But that other car, it can be a fun car for only so long, because then when your oldest becomes able and willing to drive, and my wife's just like, hey, on this next car, you got to get something that's going to be easier and safer for her to drive. Like I said, I don't drive that car very often. And at the time, I had an E46 wagon with a stick, which is an awesome, fun car to have. You can throw 2 bikes on the top, two little bikes in the back, and just they're kind of rare with a stick. But the thing was kind of just dying on me a little bit. Uh-huh. And my wife's just like, can we get a car that is an automatic? I was at my parents' house, and my dad and I were both on like cars.com or something, just looking for something used that it was going to be safe and going to be reliable, and something also fun to drive. And it was so interesting because I was looking at BMWs, and I noticed that every single 3 Series that was less than 100,000 miles was well over 10 grand. And anything that was less than 10 grand was way over 100,000 miles,
Right.
And so we're sitting there, and my dad just goes, and he goes, have you ever looked at X3s? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't. And he's like, you should look real quick. And we started looking at like kind of Gen 1 X3s that have that kind of boxy sort of look to it. And it's kind of a hidden secret that I'm excited to tell you and your audience about. But like, they sold a bajillion of those cars, and they sold the vast majority of them on leases. There are so many on the used market right now that have artificially low miles. So at that point, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I'm seeing like really, really, really beautifully cars in massively good condition, crazy low miles. And there's so many of them, the prices, there's plenty of supply. So the prices are so low. It was to the point where I was just like, what color should I get?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, it was a car that when it launched, I worked on the Flash microsite that launched that vehicle. So I have this kind of tie back to when it launched.
What kind of bucket list adventures are on the list?
Yep.
So my wife, she grew up going to Yosemite every summer. She went to Yosemite climbing school. When we lived in Utah. Our goal, and we did it every year, was 3 national parks every summer. And so we have a map on our mantle that has every single national park on it. And every time we go to one, we can put a little sticker on it. And so for us, and we, in terms of, let's just say, domestic adventure, it's really hitting the national parks whenever we can.
Absolutely. What's your favorite car movie?
My favorite car movie, I'm going to go ahead and say Ronin.
Ah, yes, the Audi S8 with NOS.
Yes. The S8, and then also the kind of like the 5 Series with the M trim on it. Yeah, like Ronin is something that, we just barely showed that to my 14-year-old son for the first time. And to watch that with him, because it's a weird movie. It's a movie that feels much older than when it was actually shot. It feels like a more like a 70s style spy flick, even though it was filmed and released in the late 90s. But it's got just that classic, timeless kind of spycraft vibe to it, plus these amazing car chases. John Frankenheimer shot that movie, and he's an amazing classic director, but he, in that film, really innovated the idea of dropping the camera down right in front of the grill of those cars as they're hauling down those little alleyways, and it just gives that amazing sensation of speed, and just that really he understood where to put a lens in order to capture just why cars are cool.
That was one of my favorite movies. Actually, I think that came up in my conversation with Scotto, actually, because we were talking about the A8 for him. You are wearing a Baltic watch currently. I know you're a Seiko guy as well, as am I. Yeah. What is it about these watches, man? Like, why do we love these things so much?
Well, it's interesting, for me, living out west and commuting into work every day by car, like that car was this mechanical, like, manifestation of what brand I wanted to put out there, what I'm trying to say, right? So I always thought of my car as like an extension of myself. Moving to New York, and I've always had a watch on my wrist ever since like 3rd grade, and have cared what watch is on my wrist. But moving to New York, and then all of a sudden taking the train into Manhattan every day, and not being in a car every single day, it was hard. It was a jarring thing to all of a sudden, like, what are these signifiers that I want to have associated with me, and what do I want to keep with me every day that makes me feel like I am who I am?
Right.
I started caring a lot more about the watch on my wrist, and it, for me, it's not just, what I don't, the watch is a part of my whole ensemble. It's just like I don't wear the same watch every single day. I definitely wear a different watch every day, and it very much depends on what I'm choosing to wear that day. I care deeply for what that pairing actually says.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, when I do take and post a wrist shot on Instagram, I'm trying to actually angle the camera so that you can see the rest of the context. I think a watch out of context is cool and it's pretty, but like when it's paired with the right kind of outfit or the right shoes, I think it says so much more, and you can, it's more fun too.
Yeah. And that's why I think, obviously Bradley at Autodromo is killing it, from that perspective, being able to drive just by looking at your wrist, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
in fact, that was his stuff, was kind of my endpoint into kind of watch enthusiasm. I came across Autodromo back when I lived in Salt Lake. I was writing for a small auto blog called Motoring Con Brio, which was a fun little enthusiast blog several years ago. And I think they were maybe their first advertising partner. And so I saw Autodromo watches on this little blog, and I started following them, and reached out and got to know Bradley, maybe 6 years ago. And that led me to, reading Worn and Wound, which led me to reading Hodinkee and Gear Patrol and all these other places that cover watches. But Autodromo was a big gateway for me into kind of the watch enthusiast culture.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's the real deal for sure. What why is the Land Rover Defender so worthy of its like obsessive praise?
Hmm. It's interesting. So when I was a kid growing up, my dad loved the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy. And this is a South African film. It takes place in Africa. It's a comedy. It's hysterical, and it heavily features a Series 1 Land Rover, 88 wheelbase. But so, at a young age, I just fell in love with Land Rovers, and I love that those pieces of it that really are so iconic, like the headlight cluster or the gnarly tire on the bonnet. So yeah, I think that design language just connotates or denotates adventure. It just does. You can't draw a different thing that says adventure more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the new Bronco?
I think it's awesome. I think that they struck the balance between retro design language and that modern interpretation. It's something that, when the new Defender came out last year, I was not a hater. I was like, this is cool. This is cool. They did a good job of making a cool looking vehicle. It did not ring Defender to me. It rang Land Rover, modern Land Rover, which is
Yes.
cool, which I like. I think they're awesome. But when you see this Bronco, it definitely, you can squint and see an old Bronco, and
Yeah.
that's the squint test. The squint
Yeah.
test is, you can't do that with the new Land Rover and the new Defender the way you can with the new Bronco. I had a good buddy that had a Bronco in high school, and the second that came out, we were texting each other, and he just was blown away by it. So, I think that for people who have been owners and enthusiasts, it's doing a great job of speaking to that iconography and that language that resonates with them. So a squint test is always a good thing to try in those scenarios.
Yeah, I think they nailed it. I think they're trumping the competition for sure. And it seems unbelievably capable. I know they've got like 7 different trim levels or whatever it is, but more power to them, I guess. Do you have a Grail watch and or Grail car?
Oh wow, yeah. I don't know. I think watch wise, I just love, like, it's cliche, but I love a Speedmaster. I could see myself wanting to have a Speedmaster in my collection one day. In terms of cars, like, would love a 1970-ish Land Rover Series 2A in pale green, sure.
Not specific at all.
Think about it frequently. Would have a cream hardtop with matching cream steelies, and and one on the bonnet. I also love BMWs, as you've heard, and for me, I'm infatuated with wagons. So think of like a Denon B3 spec, wagon, modern, brand new.
That's awesome. Well, listen, man, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or promote?
Well, no, I mean, you can follow Cantonment on Instagram. We are at Cantonment Co. And our website is cantonment.co. You can follow me if you're interested on Instagram. I'm at Kyality, so Kyality. That's a long story about how that name came around.
Is that Kyle's reality or
Do you want me to go there? This is a
this is your time, Kyle? Why don't you? Yeah, absolutely. Unless you don't want to tell, is it embarrassing?
no, it's a cool story.
Cool.
I used to work with a photographer by the name of Skylar Nielsen, super talented photographer who has a very strong stutter, and something that he actually is extremely endearing about him. And the stutter is really interesting because it's particularly strong when he tries to say someone's name.
Oh.
And so what he does as a way to kind of sidestep that is he gives people nicknames. And for some reason, when he gives someone a nickname, he didn't stutter.
Oh, interesting.
So I became not Kyle, but Kyality. One of my coworkers who was Peter, became Pedrosity. But whenever he just would make a fun nickname up for somebody, all of a sudden he wouldn't stutter when saying that person's name.
Yeah, I wonder what the psychology is behind that, or like what kind of like trigger mechanism.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I just loved when he'd call me Kyality. So when things like Twitter came around and, blogs and stuff like that, I just adopted that nickname that he had given me as my nickname on pretty much everything. So if you go looking for Kyality, it's likely me.
That's awesome. That's good SEO.
We'll see.
Well, listen, man, thank you so much. It's great to see you, talk to you, and obviously what's been a very strange time. And yeah, congrats on all the release and the launch of Cantonment, man. That's super exciting.
Thank you so much. Keep up what you're doing. We all love your podcast, so we really, really appreciate what you're doing, man.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, cool. Well, let's chat soon.
Cool.
Okay. This wraps up another episode of the Standard Age podcast. Big thanks, as always, goes to Clear Audio for their use of their headphones, as well as to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, don't forget to rate and review the show. Stay tuned in 2 weeks' time for another episode. Bye, everyone.